Duterte defense counsel Nicholas Kaufman argues substantial grounds required to bring the case to trial at the ICC have not been met. The ICC prosecution says the Philippine probe was independent and court-funded. Political party NUP withholds support for the latest impeachment bid against Vice President Sara Duterte in the House of Representatives. US President Donald Trump lays out his case for a possible attack on Iran. And a Hong Kong court overturns media owner Jimmy Lai's fraud conviction. Duterte lead defense counsel Nicholas Kaufman presents his submissions on merits on day 3 of the confirmation of charges hearing against former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte at the International Criminal Court or ICC. Kaufman argues that the prosecution has not met the substantial grounds required by the court to bring the case against Duterte to trial. He focuses on what he calls a lack of evidence for criminal intent and the contextual elements of crimes against humanity. He says the so-called common plan mentioned by prosecutors was a legitimate, widely supported crime suppression strategy, not a criminal plan to murder. Kaufman also asserts there is no causal nexus linking Duterte's statements directly to the 49 incidents of murder.
There is no smoking gun in this case. And that is not for want of a desperate attempt to find one on the part of the prosecution, with all their leading questions when they interviewed their criminal cooperating witnesses.
The defense counsel also alleges that the alleged widespread or systematic attack against a civilian population is unsubstantiated. He claims the targeted group of suspected drug pushers and criminals is an arbitrary subgroup, not a legally defined civilian population. Rappler also talks to lawyer Ros Tugade, law professor and assistant to counsel at the ICC. Tugade comments on Kaufman's assertions that Duterte's speeches were just colorful narrative and did not show crafty design. Tugade says speeches, especially the impromptu ones, show intent, and it is allowed in the ICC framework to establish a criminal pattern or modus operandi. Tugade also clarifies the meaning of the term civilian population within the framework of the Rome Statute.
So in the elements of crimes, if you read there in the text, it says, any civilian population. The word any there is not accidental. Any civilian population means any one part of the population.
The International Criminal Court prosecution says its Philippine investigation was done independently and funded by a court-approved budget. This when Rappler asked the Office of the Prosecutor to respond to allegations of former soldiers that they delivered cash to former Senator Antonio Trillanes IV, allegedly to help fund the activities of ICC investigators when they came to the Philippines from 2023 to 2025. An affidavit began circulating on the second day of the pre-trial hearing of former President Rodrigo Duterte at The Hague, alleging that hotel accommodations for ICC personnel were paid for with funds supposedly linked to resigned Congressman Zaldi Co. Denying the ex-soldier's allegations, Trillanes says he will file cyber libel complaints against them and their lawyer, Levi Baligod. The National Unity Party says it is unlikely to support the latest impeachment drive against Vice President Sara Duterte. The NUP is the second biggest political party in the country and the largest voting bloc after Lakas with around 30 members. The party adds, quote, unless compelling new evidence emerges during the course of these hearings that fundamentally alters the factual basis for the impeachment complaint, the NUP will most likely not vote in favor of the measure. The stance of the NUP drew attention as most of its members supported the impeachment complaint against the Vice President in the 19th Congress. The complaint was approved by the House but the Senate trial did not proceed after the Supreme Court stepped in. The NUP statement came a week after Duterte announced her bid for president in 2028, a move analysts said could test her support among lawmakers. Impeachment campaigners could still gather the 105 to 106 votes needed to meet the one-third threshold even without the NUP votes. US President Donald Trump briefly lays out his case for a possible attack on Iran in his State of the Union speech to Congress. He says he will not allow the world's biggest sponsor of terrorism to have a nuclear weapon. Trump also points to Tehran's support for militant groups, its killing of protesters, and the country's missile and nuclear programs as threats to the region and the United States.
For decades, it had been the policy of the United States never to allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. Many decades. Since they seized control of that proud nation 47 years ago, the regime and its murderous proxies have spread nothing but terrorism and death and hate.
Meantime, Iran says its nuclear research is for civilian energy production only. Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghei says claims about Iran's nuclear program, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and the reported death toll in the January unrest were false and merely repeated what he described as big lies. A Hong Kong court overturns the fraud conviction and prison sentence of pro-democracy media tycoon Jimmy Lai. This in a surprise legal decision that comes soon after Lai was sentenced to jail for 20 years on a separate national security charge. Judges say they allowed the appeal from Lai to proceed as a lower court judge had erred. Even with the quashing of the fraud conviction and sentence, Lai will still remain in prison for 20 years over 2 counts of conspiracy to collude with foreign forces and 1 for publishing seditious materials. This legal victory was a rare one for the prominent China critic who faced multiple prosecutions in recent years. Lai, founder of the now-defunct Apple Daily, was among many activists arrested in the aftermath of Hong Kong's 2019 pro-democracy protests. The 78-year-old British citizen has denied all the charges against him and calls himself a political prisoner facing persecution from Beijing. And that's today's wrap. I'm JC Gotinga. Thank you for watching. Click the link below for the full story. For more updates, download the Rappler app.